Okay, will the NRL ever place a second team in New Zealand? Now, obviously, we've got the Warriors in Auckland, the New Zealand Warriors, and the engagement the Warriors had with fans across the country of New Zealand last year, and in fact across the world. It wasn't just New Zealand. A lot of people around the world bought into the Warriors last year. Was fantastic. Obviously, that has been tempered with what happened with the COVID pandemic in 2020 and until 2022 playing outside of New Zealand and the issues of playing at home. But when they returned home, the response from fans was fantastic. Had a great season and went deep into finals, which was important. The Warriors, being a Warriors fan, has been difficult. They've only made the grand final twice, and they've only had one minor premiership in that time. Once in 2002, once in 2011, making grand finals, winning the minor premiership in 2002. It's been a hard slog since 1995. They've never had a wooden spoon, mind, but it has been a hard slog as Warrior fans. But at the moment, obviously, the talk is where that 18th team is going to go. It's not going to New Zealand, by the way. It's most likely going to the Bears organisation in North Sydney Central Coast. However, there's this conversation is growing in regards to a second team in New Zealand. Now, I think the NRL decide to go to a 19 and then eventually a 20-team league. They might bring the 19 and 20th teams in at the same time. They're very keen on growing the game. Obviously, we've got the Vegas games coming up, and there's going to be a lot of income, mostly from the gambling money, coming in from that. It's around $200 to $300 million dollars in sponsorship money coming in from that alone. So there's a lot of money coming into the gaming, injected into the game. More teams also means a more expensive TV deal as well, media rights deal. So I've decided to look at the population figures of New Zealand, which are very, very interesting. The population as a whole is around 5.3 million approximately, about 5.3 million people. That's basically the same size as Sydney or Melbourne. And then you look at Sydney with the NRL and how many teams are in the Sydney metro area, and then you look at Melbourne with the AFL, similar. There's quite a few teams, and people are saying, there's too many teams in Sydney, you've got to move some teams. Crowd numbers have been going up. The socio-economic situation surrounding Sydney and the wider metro area has changed since the Super League war. A lot's changed since the late 80s, early 90s. A lot's changed since the league was last at 20 teams, and a lot has changed since New Zealand got the Warriors in 1995. A lot has changed. Disposable income is different. Economic circumstances different. The strength of the economies of both Australia and New Zealand is different. A lot has happened. A lot of positive changes occurred. So 5.3 million people in total live in New Zealand. So as I say, equivalent to Sydney. The North Island has between 3.9 and 4 million, and the South Island has roughly 1.3 million. So the South Island's the same population as Brisbane. The North Island, a little bit less than Sydney. Now, Auckland has 1.5 million people in the urban area, which is the city limits, and 1.7 million in the metro, which is the surrounding suburbs that are attached to Auckland, the surrounding conurbation. Wellington, the capital, is a lot smaller, 215,200 in the urban. In the surrounding metro with the satellite towns and suburbs, it's 440,900. And Christchurch, the biggest city on the South Island, is 384,800 for the urban. The metro is just over 500,000 at 521,881. Yes, that's a very exact figure that I found for Christchurch. So they're your three big cities in New Zealand. You've also got Invercargill, Dunedin. There's a few other. There's Hawke's Bay, for example, and the population centres around Hawke's Bay. You've got the Canterbury region as well. So there are other major population centres in New Zealand, but these are the three big ones in the surrounding metros. Now, you could have a team in Christchurch. It's similar metro area to Canberra. It would work. There is no doubt in my mind having a team in the South Island based out of Christchurch would work. It would sell out every weekend. Every second week when there's a home game, that would sell out, in my opinion. It would work in Wellington. A smaller city, yes. But again, it works in Townsville. Works in Wollongong. And people will say, but they're rugby league heartlands. True. But they are smaller. It works in Newcastle. They are rugby league heartlands, but they are cities of a similar, comparable size to Wellington, and it works. It does work. And if you look at New Zealand as a whole, look at the talent that is produced, and then you look at the response from fans to the Warriors last season. Look at crowd numbers. Look at the engagement through viewership figures on TV. Look at the engagement on social media online, not just in New Zealand, but actually around the world. It was a very positive engagement. And then you look at how the national side's doing. Now, yes, they all look, coaching issues. Will Wayne Bennett be the coach? Madge obviously being moved on unceremoniously. But you look what the Kiwis did at the end of last year against Australia with the biggest a record win against Australia, and they held them to 0. Yeah. And then you look at 2017. I will say this: 2017 World Cup. The games were held in New Zealand. The crowd numbers were fantastic. The crowd numbers were absolutely fantastic in 2017. Admittedly, look, that's a long time ago. A lot's happened in the world of rugby league since then. But even then, the crowd numbers were absolutely fantastic. Fantastic. I would hazard a guess that not every rugby league fan in New Zealand is a Warriors fan. It would be kind of really interesting if you had a North-South Island rivalry, or if you had a Wellington-Auckland rivalry, or if you had an intercity rivalry in the Auckland metro area, having a second team in Auckland. You could potentially have a bit of a rivalry between the Warriors and insert other team here. It's very, very doable. People say there is that lack of corporate money, and yes, the economy in New Zealand is far smaller, but the fan base is there. It's a rugby mad country for either code. It's rugby mad. Rugby union obviously is they have that more success in rugby union and a bigger global footprint, with rugby union being the bigger sport globally. But rugby league, wow, I think it will work. I'm very positive that I think it will work, and I do think the NRL will strongly consider a second team in New Zealand. I don't think, as I say, they're not going to be the 18th team, but if an ownership group was to come together and put forward a bid for either Auckland, Wellington, or Christchurch, I think they would get some traction. And I think NRL head office would have to strongly consider going a second team in New Zealand could work very, very well, especially if they added a little bit of Pacifica flavour to it. Because we do know that there's obviously a big push of growing the game in Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, the Cook Islands, and of course Papua New Guinea as well, and growing the player base and participation base in those countries. There is a big Pacifica community. And I do think having a team based out of New Zealand with a massive Pacifica Polynesian element to the playing core could have the potential to work. That obviously means you obviously would have to have a second team in Auckland, yes. But you could go down that route where you link it in where they do attract some of the best Fijian, Samoan, and Tongan talent from the islands and Cook Islands into their system and into their catchment, and have a very strong New Zealand base. It doesn't matter what city in New Zealand, but with a strong Pacifica core to their catchment and development of players and into their team system. I think that could work. There has been a discussion of having a Pacifica Polynesian NRL team, potentially based out of Fiji, Samoa, or Tonga, most likely Fiji. There has been talk of a PNG team more than just the PNG Hunters in the Queensland Cup. But in order for that to work, the infrastructure needs to be put in place, and that's a long-term commitment that takes many, many years and much investment. Whereas in New Zealand, the infrastructure is there, the stadium infrastructure is there. A lot of the stadiums were upgraded for the 2011 Rugby Union World Cup, so the stadium infrastructure is there. The cultural infrastructure is there already, with both codes being played at grassroots and youth level through the school system, and of course the player base is already there. Just look how many players who could have made the Maori team in the All-Stars that weren't selected, that could have been selected. There was a whole other team full of players that missed out on the Maori All-Stars, 2024 team. You look at the strength of the the Kiwis national side, the national side. It's a very strong team they have. So you already have those superstar players. A lot of them obviously are playing in Australia, but a fair few are playing for the Warriors that you can resonate with fans, young fans especially. So I think, yeah, at some point the NRL will place a second team in New Zealand. It may be that 19th team, it may be that 20th team. But I do think that before the decade is out, before the next 10 years is done, so if we're doing this video in 2034, we already have 20 teams and we have a second team in New Zealand. It's just a question of where. And of course, populations will still increase over the next decade. So Wellington might reach 800,000 in the metro area within the next, or 600,000. Christchurch might reach 6, 7, 800,000 in the metro area. Auckland might reach 2 million in the metro area within the next 10 years, with birth rates and emigration and growth. And you look at the population of New Zealand now; it's equivalent to Sydney or Melbourne, and they are multi-team cities in AFL and NRL. So I can see it working, and it would be fun to keep building on what the Warriors have done since they've returned playing home matches in Auckland. It was a fantastic return season. Can they build on that? And if after a couple of seasons, if fan attendance is still good and the team is still very, very competitive at the right end of the league, because that's the problem, is consistency in the league. We could be having a different discussion. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts on if and when and where the NRL go, not only with the 18th team, but potentially with a second team in New Zealand. And from me for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.